How many of you in the audience know what a near-death experience is? I'm sure you all do. That's why you're here. Well, quite a few. And how many of you have had a near-death experience? 2, 3, 3. Very good. Thank you. And the reason I want to talk about what I call near-life experiences is because I've been doing this research as a journalist and as a filmmaker into the work of a hypnotherapist named Michael Newton. Is anyone familiar with him? Not too many, okay. All right, so I'll tell you Michael Newton's story in a nutshell, and then I'll tell you how I came upon his work. Michael Newton was a psychologist here in Los Angeles area back in the 1950s, and he did not believe in past life regression as a tool of his work. The Bridey Murphy case had happened back in the 50s. Are you familiar with that? The Bridey Murphy case, this woman who remembered a lifetime in Ireland, and it was on the cover of Time. And suddenly, people said, "Not past lives? What's that about? I think I'd like to try that. I'd love to do that." As people still do today. So they called psychologists and said, "Would you do a past life regression with me?" And Michael Newton didn't believe in it. He was a skeptic. He thought that was really a waste of time because, what was the purpose of it or what was the value to it? Until one day when it was in the early 60s, when a client came in to see him. He had a presenting problem of a shoulder pain, a little bit like the case that Brian Weiss first had. If you're familiar with Brian Weiss's work, Many Lives, Many Masters, he's a psychiatrist from Yale who one of his clients came in with a problem, a pain that was in her shoulder that no doctor could understand where did this pain come from. So during the course of this session, Michael Newton said to him, "Take me to the source of your pain." And suddenly, he saw himself as a sergeant in the 4th Corps in World War I, fighting the Battle of the Somme, but he was a British sergeant. And he saw himself being bayoneted by German soldiers. Now, Michael Newton, being a skeptic, really didn't believe what he was saying. But he started to grill him, as Michael Newton is a sort of relentless questioner. "Really? You're in World War I? What's your mother's maiden name? What's your bunkmate's name? What street did you grow up on? What's your address?" Those kind of things. Because that's what he felt like. If somebody's going to create some past life memory, they should know those details. That was his theory. Anyway, so afterwards, the patient was cured of his shoulder pain. And he called a couple days later to say, "Thank you, the pain is gone." And that wasn't enough for Newton. He contacted the British War Office and said, "Did you have a guy with this name, this rank, this serial number?" Sort of thing. And it turned out, indeed, they did. And he had died in World War I. So from that point, he started seeing clients and seeing patients who had problems, presenting problems. And as he put it to me, when I did his interview, his last interview, as he calls it, he said, "What's the difference? To me, it didn't matter whether or not it was true, whether they had a past life, as long as they were being healed and helped by the therapy." That's what most hypnotherapists will say to you when you ask them, do you believe in past lives, whether they're real or not? So from there, back into the 1960s, the late 60s, so he started seeing these clients and helping them. And in the late 60s, a woman came in and said her problem was that she was very lonely and depressed and didn't fit into society, and it was suicidal, basically. And so in the course of her session, he said, "Take me to the source of your pain, especially if there's a group around you." Unbeknownst to him, that was like a trigger word while she was under hypnosis to take him to a group setting. And in her mind, she went to what she called a life between lives. She said, "Oh, I see. All the people I normally incarnate with are with me. And they're showing me and explaining to me how we all agreed not to be together in this lifetime." "Oh, okay, I'm fine now. Thank you." The session's over. And Michael Newton said, wait, what do you mean? Where are we? When did this happen? Is this in the past? Are you remembering this event? Or is this in the future? And she said, no, it's right now. I can experience this right now. I can see them. They're all sitting around your office. And after she left, he said he looked at the wall and thought, I really didn't believe in past life regression, and now this? what is it? And so basically he closed his public practice and for the next 30 years interviewed people who could take him to that place and ask them questions. What is it? Where is it? Who's there? And he cataloged those answers without telling anyone about it. Didn't tell any associates, didn't tell any other patients. He only told his wife. And he published his first book in 1994. It was called Journey of Souls. And it was quite controversial because here he was saying that out of these 7,000 cases, pretty much everyone said the same thing about the journey through life and into the afterlife. Now, how did I come to this work? I'm a filmmaker, as mentioned. Magna cum laude. I didn't even know what that was when I got that at college. I was there with my dad. I was like, Dad, what does that mean? He's like, that's good. Oh, okay, well, why Magna? What does that mean? I don't speak Latin. Anyways, in my case, my dearest, closest friend on the planet passed away in my arms in 1996. And as she lay dying, she said to me, I have this recurring dream that I'm in another dimension. I'm in another galaxy, she said. And I'm in this class where everyone's speaking a language I've never heard before, but somehow I completely understand. And I thought, okay, well, that's the morphine drip. You know, there must be the drugs they were giving her and stuff. But then when she passed away, she came to visit me. I had some profound dreams where, I'm sure you've all had a dream where you went, well, that's not really a dream. That really felt like that person was here. The way we know what it feels like when you hold a loved one's hand, And a dream is one thing, but then actually to hold a loved one's hand and say, well, that's weird. How did that happen? So I started thinking about it, like, well, how does that happen? Is it possible that, she's still somewhere? That was the thought. And then when I was working on the Charles Grodin show in New York City, I was contemplating, I wonder where she is. And I had this out-of-body experience. Has anyone had one of those? Okay, a few. Generally, it's this thing of floating around the room. You may have heard of it. Sometimes people in a near-death experience have that. Initially, they feel like they're, let's say they're in a hospital, and they may see the doctors working on them. Eben Alexander's book, you'll see that's pretty much, his first experience was being outside of his body. It's a little disconcerting at first, like, where am I? Because you're seeing yourself, below you. But anyway, Robert Monroe wrote a number of books about it. He's a scientist who really studied this. Journeys Out of Body, I think is the name of the book. But anyways, in my case, here I am in New York City. It's like 4 p.m. I'm in my apartment, and suddenly I shot out of my body at a rapid speed, which had never happened before. And I found myself hurtling up, like I saw New York sort of disappear below me, almost like the movies. And I found myself hurtling through space. And I saw that the light around me was kind of melting, It was like I was going so fast that the light was like a Star Trek episode. And then I found myself going through some kind of, all I can describe as a black hole because that's the description, but it was some kind of a tunnel that I went wobbling around until I got to the other side. And then I was traveling in this direction. That was what my conscious mind was experiencing, going this way instead of that way. And then I came to a stop, and there was my friend, Luana. Luana Anders is her name. She's an actress. And she looked at me as if to say, well, you were looking for me. Here's where I am. And at that moment, some guy outside my car, my window, my apartment, honked his truck horn. Those huge truck horns. Imagine traveling that far. Some jerk. But anyway, the odd part of that was before his hand came off the truck horn, I made the reverse trip. I felt it like a rubber band being pulled back. So I just recently was studying about black holes for my son who's doing a project. And somewhere 26 million light years in the center of the galaxy, there is this black hole, supposedly. That's the Milky Way travels around it. I went like, oh, there it is. There's my black hole. So just for a moment, go with me in that thought. Okay, if it's true that this happened, and I traveled 26 million light years before the guy's hand came off his horn. And I saw New York coming up quickly at me, and I woke up in my bed. And instead of just saying, well, that was an unusual afternoon dream, I said, what was that? If she exists somewhere on the planet or in the universe, and she can come and pull me like that, maybe I can go see her. I mean, isn't that a logical construct? You know, if she can see me, why? Maybe I can see her. That was my theory. So I actually went off and studied. She had been a Buddhist, and I thought, oh, you know, maybe Buddhism has something to do with, maybe that's a trick that you learn in Buddhism. So I started studying Tibetan philosophy, and I went to Tibet, and I've shot documentaries there, and India and stuff. And, well, their theory, at least up until recently, their theory has always been that between lives, we're wisps of smoke. Of course, you know they believe in reincarnation, as many religions do. But the process of reincarnation is described as like a wisp of smoke. Your essence is out there floating around, and depending on your karma or actions that you've had in previous lifetimes, that's where you wind up. And you might be an animal, you might be suffering, you might have a problem. That's the general knowledge that we have on the planet of what karma is and how it works. Well, what I found in this research is that's not accurate at all. That's just not the way it works according to these 7,000 people. But here I was studying this philosophy, going to Tibet, and it didn't sort of ring true to me because of my experience. Here I had been not a wisp of smoke in another galaxy. I had been rich, fully conscious rich in another galaxy. So how could he be there? How could that self, they say there's no finite self. So how could that self of rich be there if there's no, you see what I'm saying? That was the argument I would have with myself. Anyways, and then I picked up Michael Newton's book through an odd confluence of events and how it came to me. But I picked up his book and opened up in the first chapter there. He was describing someone in this between life realm, saying that they were in a classroom where everyone was dressed in white and they spoke some language that they had never heard before. So that's what I had heard from my friend. So I realized, oh, well, this is a clue. If we're going to pursue this, I'm going to pursue this. So I contacted the Michael Newton Institute. It's based, it's a worldwide organization. They have about 200 hypnotherapists worldwide practicing now, all based on Michael Newton's work. So he's published 4 books now, 3 books that sort of show what his methodology was, what his skepticism was. And then the last book was cases around the world. It's called Memories of the Afterlife. Cases around the world where hypnotherapists took their best story of one of their clients, and then the authors interviewed the client. So the client was able to tell a story of what happened. So I contacted the Newton Institute and said, gee, I think this would be an interesting documentary. I had just started making documentaries. And to my surprise, they said, yes, it would be. And normally, when you're dealing with things where people have a proprietary kind of methodology, they don't want the camera in the room, right? But in my case, they said, yes, please. And my theory was, first, when I read that 7,000 people had said the same thing about the afterlife, I, like anyone else, said, well, that's nonsense. That can't be. It has to be, they must be projecting, the psychologist or the hypnotherapist must be kind of projecting something. I went through all the things that could possibly be what the story was. So I flew to Chicago, my hometown, and they were doing a conference where they were doing accreditation for the different hypnotherapists of the Newton Institute. And they opened their doors to me. And I met Michael, and Michael said, I'm retired, I don't do interviews anymore, so I'm really sorry. And I said, well, that's okay, I'm here to learn, and I just want to turn my camera on. And after we talked for a while, he said, all right, I'll do one last interview. So I had 2 hours with him, where I got to ask anything I wanted to ask. And in the back of my mind, as a journalist, I'm trying to find the holes in the story, of course. And then when I'm done interviewing him, I interviewed his wife, who happened to be there. Because no other person on the planet could really verify what he was saying. So my first question to her was, so what did you think? What did you feel when your husband came home and told you about this research he was doing? Now, if she had said, well, of course, he's finding the mysteries of the universe, or she was trying to sell me something, you would see that right away. But her reaction was, I thought he was crazy. I thought they were going to take my husband away, that he had gone off his rocker. She said, until I heard the tapes. So he had been tape recording the sessions, and then she heard the tapes. How could it be that people from different walks of life, doesn't matter their religious background, doesn't matter what their country was, all saying relatively the same things about the journey after we die? How could that be? And at that moment I realized, the tapes. Well, nowadays you can turn a camera on and make your own tapes. And cameras now will record up to 8 hours. The technique that he perfected is, as we know hypnosis and hypnotherapy from Freudian times, and we've seen it in stage presentations where people snap their fingers and, quack like a duck stuff. We've all seen that. Well, this isn't that at all. This is more like a guided meditation. If any of you have taken yoga, has anybody taken yoga? Okay, so, and somebody says, picture yourself on a boat on a river, and you imagine what you're going to see. The difference is they ask you to speak whatever you're seeing. Just say what you're seeing. And then he asks a series of questions. Where are we? Let's go back through your lifetime. Let's go back to an incident that happened when you were a kid. And you find yourself talking about stuff that you know it's stored in your head. This thing happened to me when I was 10, and I want to examine that. That's unusual. And now we go back further and further and further, and then and I've filmed 25 of these sessions so far. They'll ask, so when did you enter the fetus? Now, I would think that most people would say, excuse me? What kind of a question is that? I mean, how could I answer that? But they don't. They say, April, or they'll say, it's always after the 4th month. And people say, because there's really nothing to do up until then. And I filmed one just the other day where somebody said, it's like being in a rocket ship. The question was, well, what's the experience like of melding into the fetus? Okay? Just go with the construct for a second. What is the experience like? And this person said, imagine being in a rocket ship traveling at this incredible rate of speed, and you drop down into the cockpit of a Ferrari going 200 miles an hour. That's what it's like. And you have to hit all the dials and hit all the switches, and you've already made the plan to come here and be with your loved ones and do the thing you're going to do. But when you drop into the fetus, you have to make sure all of the electrical charges work and all the switches and dials work. That's a really unusual description. But that idea that between lives, we're traveling at this incredible rate of speed, but to come here to this earthly gravitational place, we got to slow down. But ultimately, we have to drop in and participate. And as this guy said, sometimes not all the dials are exactly the way you thought they were going to be. Sometimes the connections are, sometimes the life that you choose, this is the way these reports are. You choose your lives, you choose your parents, you choose who you're going to be so that you can experience things, so you can learn from them. And many times you experience things so that you can teach others out of compassion. And you might choose a particular person because you think, oh, I can handle that. I can be an addict. I can be a person who is prone to addictions because I can handle that. I've done that before. I know what that's like, and I can experience that, and I can conquer that. I can get through that. I can experience that and help others. But sometimes you're not correct. You show up, and that toggle switch that you thought was going to work for you isn't working. All right. Let me, before I drop into how the process works, which when I talk about it, it's because I've been researching it for 5 years now. So to me, it's like, oh, well, that's how it works. But for those of you unfamiliar with this process, it might sound a little nutty. But so I'll just back up a second. So now I'm back in the Chicago conference. I've interviewed Michael. I've interviewed his wife. Okay? And then they say, well, would you like to film some of our session? Oh, yeah, that'll be great. As the journalist, I'm thinking this is great. I can prove the manipulation. And also as a film director, I've directed a number of feature films, and I've worked with actors, and I've written screenplays, and that's been my world. So I understand pretty clearly how a story can be told on camera, and how to tell a story on camera. And when someone's telling a story on camera, whether or not they're acting, because they know what the next sentence is going to be. Very difficult to divorce yourself from what the next sentence is. That's why Meryl Streep is so good at, those great actors, because they've convinced you in that moment of time that they don't know what they're going to say next as you watch them. So, as a documentary filmmaker, I turn the camera on, I can see really clearly and very simply when someone is trying to impress my camera, or impress me, or make up a story. Or the way a story goes. Stories that we've been telling for millennia, they got a beginning, middle, and an end. And then you can mix it up a little bit, but you can generally, we've all done that. We sit in a movie theater, we went, I know what's gonna happen. I've seen this before, this is old news. But I'm just saying, as a jaded filmmaker, that's my expertise. So I turn my camera on, we're in a conference room of about 150 people that are learning hypnotherapy, and this is a demonstration given by a woman who practices in Sedona. A terrific hypnotherapist. I've sent many people to her since then, since this incident. But I'm now in a room in a hotel in Chicago, and they've let me to come in and watch the process. And this woman is going to demonstrate, okay? Now she's done hypnosis before, and I'll tell you that I interviewed her afterwards and said, had this past life come up to you in any previous sessions? And she said, no, it had not. This experience had not. So the hypnotherapist, and it was conducted by Paul Orend, who was the president of the Newton Institute. Basically, they go back through your lifetime and experience, what stuff from your lifetime, and allows you to get the client to speak so that, they're connected to you. And you're asking these questions. And then they'll say, could you take us to a previous lifetime that has some significance on this one? And of course you have the opportunity to say, no, I can't. But in this case, she suddenly went to a concentration camp. And she was inside the showers. And she was naked. And her head was shaved. And she was surrounded by women also equally naked, waiting for the showers to come on. Now, as a jaded filmmaker, I must tell you that my instinct said, well, isn't that unusual that she would choose this kind of dramatic story? That's my first reaction. Like, why not some casual lifetime? This is pretty dramatic. And like anyone, when you hear someone tell a story of torture or being tortured or that sort of thing, it's very difficult to listen to, especially somebody who's in that emotional state. She's in tears and she's saying, I'm trying to help the other women in this shower. And then, this is the way the process works. The hypnotherapist will say, well, let's go back to a happier, earlier time in your lifetime. Let's go back to when you were kids. So she described her life in Warsaw and her family and getting married and having kids. And by the way, I looked this person up and found Anna Paczynski had lived in Warsaw and had died in Auschwitz, as well as her family. That's the thing, today you can forensically look this stuff up. So, it's possible that she had, looked it up. I don't think so. But anyway, she now goes through her lifetime and she dies and helps these other souls that are dying around her sort of get out of their bodies and move on. Okay? And at some point now she goes back to the spirit realm. This is what everybody experiences. They go back to the spirit realm after this lifetime. A little bit like getting off stage. The show is over. The play is done. You take off your costume. You put the props down. and now you travel back. Some people stick around a little bit because they're very stressed and they want to look after their loved ones, but by and large, you're greeted by a spirit guide. Everyone has one. Some people have more than one. And this is, again, based on the research, okay? It's not my philosophy or belief, or Michael Newton's belief. This is just what thousands have said. So, you have a spirit guide who is wiser, smarter, has seen all of your lifetimes. And when you see your spirit guide, generally people have an emotional reaction. Oh, there's my teacher. There's the person I've been with. Oh, I'm back. Ah, I'm home. And people describe it in these sessions where they say, where would you like to go now? At the moment of death, let's go to the last moment of this previous lifetime, and then they describe the death scene, sometimes dispassionately, sometimes emotionally, and then a spirit guide appears and helps you back home. And people say, I want to go home. Now listen, home, it's a word that means something to every one of you, different than my home, right? We all can agree that home means something to each one of us, but to each and every one of us, it's individual. So when I say I want to go home, I have a whole concept and a construct in my mind of what that is, and of course we all do, but people say this by and large when they get to that point, where would you like to go? I want to go home. And when they get back home, they're greeted by loved ones. Sometimes they're relatives, sometimes they're soul group, as Newton has called them. There's anywhere from 3 to 25 as the average, with the number that he's cataloged over the 7,000 cases. The average is 15. Who's in your soul group? It's a good question. And what I found in the research, if you examine people that you examine in your mind, people that you've met in your lifetime where you went, I've known you forever. I feel like I've known you forever. Or your loved one, your significant other, whether you're still married to them or not, or still connected to them or not, when you examine the moment when you first met your husband or wife, and of course you told the story a million times, but when you really examine the moment, and I've done this with lots of people where I'll ask, so tell me, what was that moment? When did you first know this was going to be somebody in your life? And I would say it's about 60 to 70% people say, I don't know, there was something that was familiar. I had my sister-in-law say, he made me feel like I was home. Something in his voice and his eyes made me feel like I was home. Well, in these reports, according to this research, before we come back, we get together with our soul group and we work out the details. And, not all the details, not like a screenplay or a script or a book, page 72. But you work out the 3x5 cards of the beats of your life, the emotional beats. We're going to get married. How's that going to work? I'm going to be born in India. You're going to be born in Schenectady. How are we going to get together? Well, Now, on the science point of view, there is quantum theory that sort of works with this. It's called entanglement. If anybody's ever heard of entanglement, it's this quantum physics thing of when you take two photons and you create them and put them together someplace in the universe, if you separate them and sort of tickle one, the other one is affected by it. Sort of like the way twins are. Twins, we've all heard that. Somebody has a twin and they break a leg and suddenly the other person starts limping. It's because of some kind of physiological, energetic thing that's happened when they were born and they were in the womb together and they know each other's energy. I mean, that's common lore. We all know that that's the case. So I'm just saying it kind of makes sense to me on a science level why it is we find each other. So we've got 3 to 25 soul group members, and you can think about who those might be. And many times people are shocked to see who's in their soul group. There's the person that was the stone in my life. There's my creepy uncle who I hated. What are you doing in my soul group? And then you see. So, I'm going to go to a moment where I first saw this happen on camera. And so this woman who had been in the Holocaust, who died in Auschwitz, according to her, is in between lives, and she gets back to her spirit guide, and she eventually gets back to her council of elders. This is what they call it. It's just a term, but it's wise or elderly people, older people, older people who, older, wiser souls who have been observing you and helping all of your lifetime. And there's usually anywhere from 3 to 12 in that group. And everyone sees them differently, but generally they get to a point where there's someone who helps you do a past life review. So you get to see all the stuff you did, okay? This happens in almost every session. And here I am filming it for the first time. And this woman gets to her elders and says, why? Why did I experience such a difficult life? I lost everyone. It was so painful. I don't understand. Why? And then she said, and it's in the film, and it's in the book as transcripts of these, she said, oh, wow, they're showing me images. I know this is hard to describe or understand, but they're showing me images that it was harder to choose to play the role of a perpetrator than a victim in this lifetime. Harder to choose to play the role of a perpetrator than a victim. My head shot up from the camera. I had never heard a more politically incorrect statement in my life. What? You're saying it was harder to be a Nazi. That's what you're saying. I really looked around the room like, where am I? What is this? And then I started to listen, and I started to film these sessions, and every session had something like, another example would be, about 2 days later, I filmed a woman with severe aquaphobia, couldn't go in the water at all. So here she was doing a session to kind of examine that, and she saw a lifetime in 1887 where she had been a sailor on a ship, and she had been pushed off the ship and was now drowning in the ocean. So when we come upon the scene, let's go to a previous lifetime that has some insignificance on this lifetime, she's drowning, and she's coughing and choking and spitting. And I thought, oh my God, we've got to stop the camera. But the hypnotherapist helped her rise up above that, and she's swearing like a sailor. She says, they've killed me, they've murdered me, they've pushed me off. I can see the captain's face, he's enjoying this. They have pushed me into the ocean, and I'm now dying in this ocean. She named the ship and all this other stuff. But then when he helped her get up above, after the moment of death, and into, where are we now? And she says, well, I'm up above, and oh, I see. The ship had run aground, and I had been stealing food from my comrades, and they voted to push me off the ship. And now here comes the captain. I can see him coming to me and taking my hands and saying, you have no idea how hard it was to do that to you in this lifetime. And then in that moment, she saw that this spirit is her father in this lifetime, and she saw how he had saved her from drowning when she was 3. Now, she had had a drowning incident. She wasn't aware of how it happened, but now in this session, she saw it. And she saw the captain from that lifetime as her father in this lifetime saving her. In that moment, she lost her aquaphobia. And I filmed her swimming not long after that. So, on one hand, you could argue, well, she made it all up. This is a projection. But what's the difference? Because she lost the phobia that she always thought she had, you see? But in this particular case, here's a person saying, I chose that lifetime to learn from the energy of that experience. I chose to learn what it's like to be a thief and to be killed for it. I chose to examine that energy. So, which takes us back to the theater premise, the theatrical premise. Here we are, and here's another very unusual part of the research, which is these hypnotherapists will ask during a session, how much of your soul's energy is here in this lifetime? And generally people say about 1/3. I mean, I always think it's like, why would you answer that? Wouldn't you just say, I don't know what you're talking about, what is that? But they go 28%, the number 22 comes to mind, or the number 46 comes to mind, or whatever it is, but it's roughly about a third. So what's the other part of your soul energy doing while you're here? And the description was that you can't take all your energy into your lifetime because it'll blow the circuits. That was the actual quote. There's too much energy for a human physiology to encompass. It's like an overdose. Okay, so what's the other 2/3 of your energy doing? Well, according to these people in these sessions, you're back there doing the stuff that you were always doing. Going to class? Yeah, there's classrooms in the afterlife. I mean, how many people are tired of going to class? I mean, you know, we've been going to class our whole lives. Well, apparently it's just a construct. What goes on in these classes? Well, I've, researched this quite a bit. And by the way, ultimately, after filming about 5 or 6 sessions, this was the last day of the conference, they said, well, how about you, Rich? Do you want to do a session? And I went, wait a minute. If I do a session, then I'm no longer a journalist. I'm no longer examining this. But George Plimpton, that's what his whole career was. I'm going to be paper tiger. He decided to join the football team, so he could write about it. I went, okay, yeah, I'll do it. And then I thought, this is perfect. This is a great opportunity to prove this false. Right? Because the problem that science has with hypnosis, and I've been told this by, the top guys in the field, the problem that science has with hypnotherapy and hypnosis is it's not a valid scientific tool. And the reason is because a person has a problem, an issue. They want to lose weight, whatever they want to do. They want to solve their problem. And they go to somebody hoping to solve it. And then the doctor is somebody who wants to help them. So you have this kind of, you see what I'm saying? Symbiotic relationship where you're trying to cure yourself and they're trying to cure you. And if you're cured, you could argue, well, you really wanted to be cured. It's the placebo effect. You could argue that. But in Newton's case, he took this therapy into a different area because instead of a 1-hour session, it's usually about 4 to 6 hours, and it might happen over a number of days. So you really get a chance to go deeply into your subconscious and to experience these things. And I can tell you that most of the people I've filmed and interviewed, they say, it feels unreal when I'm saying these things. It feels, bless you, it feels unreal when I experience this stuff. And there's a hypnotherapist here in Claremont. His name is Scott DeTamble, and I've been working with him quite a bit. It's really terrific. But he came up with an idea. He said, the memory of your past life doesn't exist here. It's not here. It's not in your brain. It's not in your DNA. It's not in your, the wet work up here. It's not there. It's somewhere else. It could be, and I've reported geometric shapes that people claim that they see floating around all the time. I don't know, have you seen orbs? Have you seen these things, photographs? I don't know if that's that. It's hard to, mostly it looks like dust to me, but people have reported these not visible geometric shapes that travel with us in our lifetimes, and they report that they retain all the memories of all the previous lifetimes. Now, I don't know if that's a fact, but I can just tell you it was reported as such. So when you have a memory come to your brain from outside of you, okay, it's going to feel foreign because it's not from here. But once you experience it, once you say, oh, I see, I'm a priest, and I'm a monk, and I'm a soldier, and I'm carrying a gun, and even though your conscious mind is saying, come on, you're making this up, your subconscious is speaking. And later on, when you re-examine it, you go, oh, that's right. Yeah, that's right. I remember that. I remember the first time I picked up a gun. I felt like I'd done this before. Okay? All right, so, Rich, would you like to try your own session? Okay. So, I went home and I wrote up a list of questions. They ask you to bring about 10 questions to the, or 20 questions. And you might ask if you got somewhere. And I really didn't think I was going anywhere because as you can hear, I'm a little bit of a hyper guy. I drink a lot of coffee. So, as many people they feel like, oh, I can't be hypnotized. And I also was under the misperception that hypnosis has something to do with being under, that you're out, you're not conscious. Well, that's not the case at all. It is identical to a guided meditation. You are, medication, that's good, a meditation, where you are fully conscious of everything you're seeing and hearing, but you're relaxed, and you're like just letting it flow. So, but I was able to, I thought, okay, this is great. I am not going to be led anywhere because I refuse to be led, right? When they ask me, let's go to a previous lifetime, and I don't see anything, I'm going to say, I don't see anything. I am not going to allow anyone, because I'm doing this for this particular reason. You see, I've come at it from a completely different angle. I don't have a presenting problem, I have the opposite. I'm here to prove that this is false. I thought that's a great premise. But I'll write up, like, I don't know, like a dozen questions. But about 2 in the morning, I remember I wrote, I got to have a list. What's the meaning of life? You know, blah, 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 blah. You know what? I'll put a false question in here. I'm going to put a question that only I know the answer to. And therefore, if somebody leads me to the answer, they're false, they're lying. So what question could I ask? Well, I'll tell you what it was. Some time ago, I was waking, this happened actually this morning. I was waking up this morning and I heard Urbi et Urbani. Urbi et Urbani. What the? It's Latin. Urbi et Urbani. I never took Latin. I speak Italian, but I never spoke Latin. At least that I'm aware of. That's funny. Push the button. See? These little coincidental things happen to you that you think aren't coincidental, but they are. Well, they seem to be. Urbi et Urbani. I looked it up today. When Vatican has some kind of a story they want to tell, they announce Urbi et Orbi. It means to the people and to the world. But Urbani means to the citizens of the city. So Urbi would be the city people, city folk. And Urbani. Wow. Oh, you know what it is? Probably the battery's done. I think so. Oh. Or it's the creature. Thank you. How's that? Oh yeah, okay, great. How weird that you would actually have a microphone ready to go for me. That's really cool. Sorry. Okay, with me, Urbi Urbani. I looked it up this morning, and I was like, what the? Okay, and then I thought, well, I'll start this talk by saying, to citizens and the citizens of the world. Well, it wouldn't mean anything to you guys, but to me it means something because when I went to the session, prior to the session, I had had a dream where I heard someone speaking to me in Latin, okay? And I wrote down these 2 words, vanum populatum. And you know how when you wake up sometimes you hear a voice or something, or your dream and you write it down, and then you forget about it, and then, months later you come and you're like, what does that mean? The essence of truth is what? Well, in this case, I had written down vanum populatum. And about a week or 2 later, I looked it up. Google, thank God for Google. And turns out vanum's a word. Interesting, vanum, it means vanity. That's unusual. Okay. Who's talking to me about vanity? Populatum. What does that mean? Anyone? To annihilate. To utterly destroy. To wipe off the face of the earth. Now, whoever came up with that word, they were pretty adamant about what the meaning of it. Think about it. To utterly destroy, to annihilate, to wipe off the face of the earth is what populatum means. And eventually it became something else, as we know. Populated. But I didn't know that, okay? Annihilate vanity. Wait a minute. Who's telling me to annihilate vanity in Latin? I live in LA. Where do I begin? Annihilate vanity. What the? Wait a minute. Oh, this is like destroy the ego, right? You've heard that in Buddhism, destroy the ego. But But this is a variation on that. This is not destroy the self, which is, you do that through meditation of the self is always changing, etc., etc. In this case, it's annihilate things of the ego. What are those? The Oscars, limousines, makeup, hair, clothing. And not just point out that that's nonsense, annihilate it. Wow. Really, like a message from the gods. I really couldn't get my mind around it, other than I had an impression that the person talking to me was me. That I was telling myself that, but like an older version of me. And I was thinking, what, an older version speaks Latin? Why wouldn't the older version of me know that I don't speak Latin? I couldn't get my mind around it. So that was my question. That was going to be the question in there, knowing that if a hypnotherapist asked me, what's the meaning of Annum Populatum, and he answered it, he'd be wrong. Okay? I'm pretty assured I'm the only person on the planet who could answer that question. So now I come to the session, and we do this thing where he says, let's go to your previous lifetime. And I have until about 10:30? 10:30? 10:30. Ish?
10:30-ish.
All right. Oh, I'm fine. I'm fine. Are you guys okay? Everybody with me?
Yeah.
So, let's go to a previous lifetime that has some significance in this lifetime. And I didn't see anything, and I kept saying, I don't see anything, I don't see anything. I'm sorry, I don't see a thing, I don't see anything. And I did that for about 20 minutes. Nothing. Got nothing. Got nothing for you, don't see anything. And I was going to say that until he gave up. And then he said, just look down. And I saw my feet in a creek. And then as I pulled back the visual, I saw that I was an American Indian, a Native American. And my conscious mind is going, oh, come on, please, really? But then I allowed my subconscious to speak. And I said, well, I'm an American Indian, I'm of the Lakota tribe, I'm a shaman or a healer, and my name is Watanka, and my tribe has been wiped out by the Huron. Now, it's a longer version of that, but that's the short version. And all of that I didn't believe as I said it. But I did have the experience of going to a teepee and opening it up and seeing a woman lying on the ground with her throat cut and blood everywhere. And I said, they've killed my wife and taken my son. Now, how I knew that there was a son there, I don't know. But I felt the emotion of that sentence. The full emotion of that. And started to sob. And I was thinking to myself, God, if you're making this up, why are you feeling this? This is so intense. Anyway, some months later, I was at a funeral in Wisconsin. I was talking to a cousin of mine who suddenly revealed that he was a historian of the Lakota. I had not known that, and I said, oh, okay, well, let me tell you about this thing that I had. And he said, well, wait, don't tell me anything. Just describe how you were dressed. I said, well, I was, I had buckskin on and I had feathers. He said, were they up? And I said, no, they were down. They were in my hair. He said, well, that means you were a healer. You were a shaman. I said, oh, that's funny. That's what I said. He said, what was your name? I said, Watanka. He said, well, that's what they call their healers. The word is Wakantanka. It means the Great Spirit. It's a shortened version of that. Couldn't find that online. It doesn't exist because it's a derivative. And I said, well, what about the Huron and the Lakota? I mean, Montana. Look, the Huron are in New York. He said, you're sitting in the spot where they fought for 60 years, Eau Claire, Wisconsin. Those details I couldn't look up, so it verified for me that particular case. Okay. So then I went into the Between Lives realm, and I had that experience, and it was pretty profound. And I met my counsel, and I found the answer to Annum Populatum. When I asked the question in front of my counsel, they all laughed uproariously, and I saw in that moment that my lead counsel guy said, why don't you ask Rich? He knows the answer to that. And I saw myself lying on a couch, like a little cartoon of myself on the couch. And I realized in that moment he was referring to the higher self, Rich. Because he referred to that guy as Rich, you see? He said, why don't you ask Rich the answer to that question? He knows it. And I realized my temporary self, the guy that's on stage now, here on the planet, that Rich guy, I had given it to Rich as a puzzle, knowing that he likes puzzles, and he would Google it, and he would find the answer to it, and he would meditate on it, and he would learn it. And that's the only way to get that kind of slug that's on the couch to actually learn something. Make him work for it. So in that moment, I saw that I had given myself that question so I could learn the meaning of annihilate vanity. All right, so because we don't have a lot of time, I'm going to just skip down a little bit. And so after that session, it blew my mind. It was like taking the red pill, as they say, and I started to see the planet from a completely different perspective. I continued to film people under deep hypnosis, as I've done for the past 5 years. And I wrote the book, Flip Side. I was working on the movie Salt, and one of the actors said, you know, your documentary sounds like a book. So the book is the transcripts of all of these 15 sessions that I've either filmed or gathered or collected, interviews with hypnotherapists who talk about this methodology. And now the next book, it's still continuing filming people under deep hypnosis, but now I'm starting to talk to people about what I call near-life experiences. Because in those experiences, we get a glimpse of what it's like behind the stage. We get a glimpse of what it's like off stage in the life part, where this is our existence for millennia. That this temporary life here is, you know, that's the stage experience. This is what we experience here, but back there, it's a much more all-encompassing life and experience. So we get a glimpse of life, of what really life is. And recently I filmed a session with a woman who was a jaded film producer. What I've been doing is choosing the people that do these sessions, because I know them. I've known them for a long time. I know they're jaded. I know they're skeptics. I know they don't believe in any particular religion, or they do. Doesn't matter. I choose them because I know their background. And then as we drive out to the session, they tell me, oh, this is never going to work. It's not going to happen. I can't be hypnotized, you know, blah, blah, blah. And they all have the same experience. In this one particular woman's case, she said, the only reason I'm doing this session is because the doctor found a tumor on my ovary, and I thought, you know, if I can talk to my subconscious about healing, that's a good thing. So I'm going to do this for that reason, but I don't believe I can be hypnotized, and I don't believe anything you're saying about the afterlife. Okay? I was like, all right. So we went out to the session, and sure enough, she went into a previous lifetime, very specific, a rancher in Arizona who got left out in the woods by his young bride, to die because he couldn't make it back without the buckboard. And then she went into a life between lives where she was with her soul group doing the most amazing things and games and unbelievable descriptions. But eventually she got to have a discussion with her spirit guide, who answered her on the way out there. I said, you need some questions just in case you get somewhere. Oh, I'm not going to get anywhere. Well, just have some. So she had these list of questions. And the first one was, what about my operation that's going to come up? And the spirit guide said, it's fine. You've got great doctors. It's physical. Go in, get it taken care of. There's nothing to worry about. And then the follow-up question was, well, is there anything the hypnotherapist can say or do to help me in the healing process? And the spirit guide said, why? Is he a surgeon? Didn't I just tell you your surgeons are fine? So I was like, well, this is funny. A spirit guide who's a curmudgeon, you know, doesn't want to be bothered with questions. And by the way, she was fine. Everything was fine. So, but then her 3 questions that were, I thought, kind of unusual. But she said, what's the meaning of the shift? This was before 2012. People were talking about a shift in consciousness upon us on the planet, which she thought was nonsense, but she wanted to ask. Now, her second question was, is the universe a machine? And the third is, what or who is God? Good question. So now we get to the first question, and the spirit guide says, you humans always feel the need to name things that you think that's going to give you a better handle on it. So the shift, in terms of the cosmos, very little meaning. However, I'm listening to this answer like, wow, what a jaded, you humans, I mean, what a thing to say. But he says, if you want to understand what a shift in consciousness is, imagine yourself a crab walking on the ocean floor. And you open your eyes and realize you're in an ocean. That's a shift in consciousness. And at that point, I was thinking about this myself, because, you know, oxygen is an ocean. It's the same as water. It really is. We breathe it in, we let it go, we don't see it, but it is the thing that's around us at all times. It functions just the way water does on our planet. We can experience water, we know what water is, but we can't see oxygen, so we don't really think about it, of course. But of course, once you realize we're in an ocean of it, it makes sense to keep it clean, right? But that's a shift in consciousness, understanding that you're in an ocean. Also that we're all connected to each other. This is what people say over and over again when they have an apotheosis. They get to a point where they're in their session where they go, I can't even describe what I'm experiencing. There are no words for it, but I see that we're all connected. We're all like this leaves on a tree. We all come from the same place. We're all part of the same energetic pattern. Okay? Second question, is the universe a machine? And he answered, yes, it is. I thought that was unusual. He said, however, it's sentient. Meaning, I guess, you learn something, and the universe learns it. Or the universe, something happens, and so it's like this thing of a knowledge continuing on. I don't know, it's beyond my brain capacity. But that's what he said. The universe functions as a mechanism, but it's sentient. And then the third question, what or who is God? And I was on the edge of my seat, and he said, well, God is beyond the capacity of the human brain to comprehend. It's just not physically possible. Now, at first I thought he was ducking the question, but then I was like, well, wait a minute, a computer, if you give it too much information, what does it do? It freezes up. It's too much information. It can't compute the information. So what he's saying is that the human brain, the capacity of the brain, it's just not physically possible, is the way he put it, for the brain to comprehend it. He said, however, you can experience God by opening your heart to everyone and to all things. Now, when I first heard it, I thought, oh, that's like, a greeting card. Open your heart to everyone and all things. You want to experience God. But when you break it down, like experiencing water or snow, you go to someone, a bushman living in the Kalahari Desert, and you tell him about snow, and he looks at you like, yeah. And you say, no, it comes from the sky, and it's cold, and it melts in your hand, and then, you can jump in it, and you can roll around it, and you can ball it up and throw it at people. I mean, you can't really describe water or snow to a person who doesn't understand it unless they experience it. Sticking your hand in a bucket of water, now you know what water is. Jumping in a pool, you can experience water. Then you know it. Well, it's almost like a drunk. Describing to somebody what it's like to get drunk, to drink wine, to somebody who's never had a glass of anything. It's a little bit of this, and then you feel kind of goofy, and they're thinking, kind of goofy, I don't know what that means. But, instead of using alcohol as an example, but it is an accurate description. You can't know what it's like to be drunk unless you experience it. I'm not saying anyone should, but so that's why water's a better example. You can experience water. We all can experience water. And how do we experience God, according to this fella, the spirit guide? You have to open your heart to everyone. Wait a minute, that's not easy to do. How do you open your heart to the person, pointing a gun at you? How do you open your heart to the guy who just cut you off in traffic? How do you open your heart to a relative who abused you? How could you possibly open your heart to everyone? Unless you do. Because if you want to experience what God is, open your heart to everyone. Takes judgment off the table. And this is, by the way, what they say, these thousands of cases, that between lives, there's no judgment as we know it here. There's nobody doing this. There's no karma, bad karma. That the people who choose difficult lives, by and large, are those older, wiser souls who feel they can handle it. The children that are, let's say, you see them as suffering, and from a spiritual level, they're learning something. They're experiencing life on a different level. Plus, their hearts are pretty much open. You see that. You've seen that, where you meet people where you go, wow, There's no motor in here. There's no regulator of emotion. They're just emotional. Well, if you can open your heart to everyone, and there's another part to that, all things. What does that mean? Opening your heart to the table. Okay, what does that mean? Well, table's got a right to exist. It's here. It's relatively here, because we know it's atoms like agreeing to hang out together, and we're all relatively here, because we're all atoms agreeing to hang out together. But if we open our heart to everyone and to all things, well, that includes air, and that includes water, and that includes earth. That includes all these things that we seem to dispose of and don't care about and abuse. But if our heart was open to it, to a glass of water, why would we ever pollute it, you know? Why would we ever do something negative towards something our heart is open to? Or at least be having our heart open to it, we could see how my effect on this thing is going to affect other people. So, I thought that was a pretty good description of what God is. And I'll leave it at that. Your life experience. Thanks for coming. Any questions? Oh, we got one. Oh. Oh, wait. Well, your mic doesn't work. Here you go. Oh. How was that? Did you guys enjoy that? I don't need applause. Bonum populatum. No, I'm kidding. I do that now to all my friends. You know, they go, "Do you really want the bigger size?" I go, "Bonum populatum, dude." You know. Go ahead.
Yeah, if we do travel in soul groups and we come back in you say 3 to 15, like, do we have to wait for everybody in our soul group to die before we can come back and do our new act or whatever?
Well, just in terms of logic, yes, you would have to do your own act to come back. However, well, the way they describe it is that we're always back there taking classes, doing stuff. So no, there's rare times when you're all together there fully. And I've seen them in sessions where they say, I see in this particular time and space I was there. Now, in terms of time and space, in terms of like how long a lifetime is, 80 years, let's say, if we're all lucky, 90, 100, great. In a session I filmed recently, a woman who I've known since grade school had a session where she saw herself as a teacher between lives, and her class was waiting for her. And the way she described it is, it feels like I went out for a cigarette and now is returning to my class. Like they were out learning something, and then she went off to have a lifetime, which lasted about 25 years in her description of this lifetime. And then now she was back. So I started to think, like, time of a cigarette, what's that, like 10 minutes, right? At the most, maybe 5. Is it possible that a lifetime, so I come to you and I say, I need your help. There's a doctor in Africa, I want him to learn about compassion. And I need you to be born in Africa, but you're only going to live 6 months. And it's going to be difficult. It's going to be pain, and everyone around you is going to suffer, and you're going to suffer. But it's only like 6 minutes. Do you think you can handle that? You see what I'm saying? It's only like, it may very well be, and I, got to get my mind around it, but it may very well be that our lifetimes of 80 years, for us back over there, it's like watching a movie. Literally, like, let's sit down, let's watch this movie. Wow, ooh, I had no idea. Oh, how did you lose your head? Well, that was brilliant. I didn't see that coming. That was new. That was good. That was good. Oh, the part a little boring in that thing there. But otherwise, I thought you did a really good job. I mean, when you see it from that perspective, so your soul group, they're always super, close to you. But I must say, I've seen sessions where people get back to their soul group, and like one member of your soul group is saying, "Oh yeah, you thought you were really big stuff, but you didn't learn anything." So it's not like the persona suddenly shifts to being all-knowing. Like we go back, like we would think, oh, here comes the guy in the white robes. He's all-knowing. That's not the case. They're just elevated. They're in another, think of it as freshmen and seniors. You go to high school, there's a lot of freshmen that are really smart. And there's a lot of seniors that are smarter. But, let's say you go into this classroom and there's some people who graduated, they're over there. Well, they're not all-knowing. They're just wiser. You see? Anyway.
Have a question over here?
She's got the mic. Go ahead.
Yes. A husband I was married to in 1972 was killed in an automobile accident.
I'm sorry.
And his spirit came to me right away,
Oh.
but I had not studied any of this. It came as a buzzing sound, and I knew he was going to materialize. And I said, no, 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 because I was so afraid. But since then, he has come to me often, and he was a very spiritual man.
Do you see him, or is he in your mind's eye, or is he while you're sleeping, or what?
Well, something will occur
Mm-hmm.
that reminds me of him.
Mm-hmm.
And it will just, like, I knew him very well, so like Jonathan Livingston Seagull is something he loved. So anytime that comes into the news or people, well, he actually, I feel like he's hugging me.
Oh, that's great.
And he told me early after he died, he says, as I come back to you, I will help you go to the next level of spiritual consciousness.
Lovely.
And he has done that over the years. And long periods of time without thinking of him.
Yeah.
But then he will, all of a sudden, he'll come into my mind, and that's a time when I've learned something new, because I study continuously. So, but my real question to you right now is it only people that you're really, really close to that come back? Like, I have a grandfather that died 50 years ago, and he has never come to me until today.
Oh, until today. Wow.
Today. It's his birthday today.
Oh.
And
Lovely.
I thought of him on
Can I welcome him to the crowd?
Yeah, I've thought of him on his birthday, but today I actually felt his presence.
Oh, that's lovely. Well, just to answer your question, it is, of course, the conundrum is, and I've had many people say to me, in fact, a close friend said, why did Luana come visit you? I knew her for 20 years before you even met her. Why would she bother with you? You only knew her 17 years. And my father, when he passed away, came and spoke to me the night he died and dictated a letter to me. I mean, woke me up, I felt his arm on my shoulder, and he said, write this down. And I wrote down what he was saying, which was, I'm here with so-and-so and so, people I'd never heard of, but my mom knew who they were. And he was here, he was saying, I'm experiencing indescribable beauty, he said, and I'm with these people, and I love you. And at the end of the whole thing, I said to him, so Dad, why are you telling this to me? Because he had specific messages from my brothers, which they didn't want to hear. And I said, why are you telling me this? And he said, because you can hear me.
Yeah.
It's a dialing mechanism on an FM dial, Our energy, people, I'm sorry to say this, but people don't die. They literally just shift their energy, because we're all energy. I mean, their body, of course, you have to deal with that, but their energy doesn't disappear, and it literally sticks around, depending. And when we think of 50 years, we feel it like, oh, it's a long time. But for them, literally, like I'm saying, it might, to them, just be like I went out for a sandwich. But the idea that people, now I just interviewed an attorney about a month ago who contacted me for the next book. And she said she's had over 100 cases where she represents murderers. She's a defense attorney, people who murdered other people. Okay? Almost always second degree, so it's usually driving or some stupid thing or drugs or alcohol related. She said every single case, that person had a visitation from the victim who said, I'm okay and I can help you. Now, because just like you said, you couldn't process the idea that your husband was going to show up. These people really can't process that the person they killed. I mean, in one case she described, this boy keeps showing up, and he only saw him the instant he ran him over. But the boy came to say, look, I'm okay, and I can help you. Of course, none of them took up the advice, because they couldn't process it, and you can't tell the victim's family. Who can you tell other than your attorney? So I found that to be fascinating. If she's had over 100, then there must be other attorneys out there who've had some. It can't just be her, this one attorney in Colorado. You see what I'm saying? So people do get visitations, I think, all the time. And depending on how our tuning is, we may dismiss it, you know, because we'll say, oh, that's just a coincidence. I'll give you one other really quick story. I was in Tucson giving a talk, and a woman came up to me afterwards and said, my son hanged himself like 5 years ago, and it was devastating. And so I said, you know, because we're here, can we speak honestly about it? And I asked her to give me the details. And she told me, like, I had written this really lovely note, which basically said, I don't feel comfortable here. I don't feel I belong here. And I was trying to say in the talk, that's common in these sessions where, in a previous lifetime, I just didn't feel right. You know, the Ferrari wasn't working for me, okay? There's no judgment over on that side. However, I said, has he come to visit you in any way? Well, once, I had this really dream where we were in Paris together. I said, have you ever been to Paris? She said, no. She said, well, that's odd because a friend of mine passed away and just gave me 2 tickets to Paris, like last week. However, in this dream, her son was a baby, and she put him in this room and then came back a little bit later, and he was now grown up, and he was dancing. This guy was a musician. He was dancing to some music and took his mom's hand, and they danced. And she had that profound feeling of really holding her son's hand, okay? And I said, what was the song? She said, I don't know. I said, you do know. You're just not telling me. What was the song? No, really, I don't know. I said, you really do know. It's there. Just let it come. What's the first band that comes to your mind? She went, Led Zeppelin. It was Led Zeppelin. And then I said, what was the song? She said it was Stairway to Heaven. I said, well, if your son passed away and he's going to give you a song for you to hold on to, don't you think Stairway to Heaven might be a good one? And in that moment, she saw the coincidence. So we drove on to this restaurant, and when she got out of the car, she said, Richard, you are not going to believe when I turned on my car what was playing on the radio. Did the son get into the programming office the day before when they usually program? You know, and someone said to me, oh, listen, that song's playing somewhere on the planet right now, everywhere. And of course it is. Of course it is. But the coincidence is not the song. The coincidence is that she would come to a public talk and some strange guy would badger her into the memory of the song. That's the odd part of it. Go ahead.
My question is, during my first death experience, when I was greeted on the other side, the people greeting me, most had passed on, but there were still a couple that were still alive in this plane. Has anyone ever?
Yes, and that's very common.
Okay.
It's disconcerting because you're like, wait a minute, I know these people are dead. You're not dead. What are you doing here? And it's like, you know, you're not going to say, get out of here. Go back. But it follows what I was saying. 2/3 of your energy is always back there. It always greets you. Now, I'm going to talk about this in the next book, but, you know, there's many near-death experiences people see Jesus. Of course, Jesus doesn't appear to Buddhists or Muslims or anyone else. He just appears to Christians, by and large. And at first I thought, well, how do you know it's Jesus? It's a guy with long hair. He's not wearing a name tag. You know, I mean, usually people's brains freeze when you say, well, and Jesus was there. Like Todd Burpo's book, Heaven is for Real, and the movie's coming out. Well, he saw Jesus. And people kind of freeze and they go, oh, well, your father's a minister. And then they just go off on this thing where your brain just stops. And I say, well, go further. Who is Jesus? Who is that? And it's either, and this is Michael Newton's work, people will, let's say, their spirit guide will appear as someone to make them comfortable. So that's a possibility, but that's still that you're creating it, right? Your energy or your spirit guide is creating this energy. There's the other possibility that you're creating it just to make yourself feel better, that you know you're going to come back from your near-death experience, and you're trying to solve what the issue is, and you make Jesus appear. I mean, okay. Well, there's a third possibility, and this is what I'm coming across, is that it is Jesus. The weird part of that is, not Jesus, the Son of God. Jesus, this avatar, this person, this guy who I've seen an interview with somebody who says he's Jesus, saying that that's his job in the afterlife, is to help people come back. That's his main occupation, is to people die, you have a near-death experience, and he's there, and it's okay, you know, you got to go back. It's not your time yet. That's his gig. Now, that's a very unusual construct. I know I won't get into it. I do in the book. But ultimately, that is a third possibility, that the people that you see in the afterlife are either, some mental construct from you, a mental construct from some other person, or they're actually the person. And in this case, I'm saying they are the person. You see somebody who's there who's alive, not yet dead. Anyway, and then also I interviewed Bruce Grayson in the book, who's the father of near-death research, University of Virginia. And he talks about those cases, many cases where people see someone who they didn't know had died. And when they come, when they're out of the hospital, they find out that Uncle Pete actually had passed away. Go ahead. You're going to be faster there. You're going to throw that mic around. Thank you.
Hi, thank you so much. Really enjoyed your talk.
Oh, thanks.
I'm wondering if there are any practices that can help you open to the appropriate frequency to communicate?
Excellent question.
And if so, could you tell us about them?
Please. When I was doing my research into Tibetan philosophy and the world of Tibet, they're a peerless group of people who've perfected meditation practices. I find that their view of the planet is peerless in the sense of everything that I've ever studied. They have the most accurate about the nature of reality. Forget everything you've ever heard about them considering people deities or all that stuff. It's just not true. Theirs is a philosophy of the way we live on the planet. It's quite peerless, and they've done centuries and centuries of research. And in particular, they do guided meditations that are really excellent. And Robert Thurman, who's a friend of mine, has a number of books out. One's called The Jewel Tree Meditation of Tibet. I highly recommended it. I've had him give it to me in India and in Tibet. And give it to me meaning, he says the meditation when you close your eyes. It's a guided meditation. The reason I recommend it is it's not so much that you need to do a meditation to talk to other people. It's that first you need to do push-ups to get your shoulders strong enough so that you can greet people, you see? So if you're doing like push-ups a lot and you want to be in a particular sport, you have to get your body in shape. So getting your mind in shape to have a message is key. Because otherwise you'll hear something or you'll see something and it'll, most people get afraid of it or there's a fear or whatever they associate. And then sometimes they extrapolate, oh, they're trying to tell me to play the lottery or whatever, you see? So getting your mind focused is really valuable. So I highly recommend that. Jewel Tree of Tibet, there's one called the Vase Meditation, which you can do in the shower. It's very easy to do. There's one called Tonglen, T-O-N-G-L-E-N. I highly recommend researching. Pema Chodron wrote a book about it. The University of Wisconsin, they did a whole study on it. This is a meditation that will cure you of depression. So if you know somebody who's suffering from depression, who's addicted to Prozac or on Prozac or SSRI drugs, I highly recommend it because it's shown it does the same thing that Prozac does. It reduces the serotonin release by doing this particular meditation where you are meditating on healing somebody sitting across from you. It's literally do unto others as you would have them do unto you. That's literally what the meditation is, but you're curing them in your mind's eye. There's no research that shows that it helps them, none. But there is research that proves scientifically that it cures depression. So those are the ones that I would recommend. And further, there is lucid dreaming that the Tibetans talk about, and that's a practice of which isn't for everyone. You're half awake and half asleep. But anyway, I'm sorry, go ahead, you have one other.
What was the one more Tonglen?
Vase meditation, V-A-S-E. And it's a very simple one that anybody can do. You imagine yourself filling yourself up with water while you're in the shower. Imagine there's a hole in your head, and when it gets up to the top of your crown, you open your toes and let all the water go. And all the thoughts, everything goes. So you had stress, you had happy, whatever, they all go. Then you close your toes, and then you fill up again. And you keep doing that over and over until somebody knocks on the door and says, "We're in a drought. Stop using the shower, please." Sorry? Oh, Robert Thurman, Uma's dad. Thurman. He's the head of Columbia Studies of Tibetan Philosophy, and he's going to be a chapter in the book as well. And Bob is a good pal, and Jewel Tree is a wonderful. He's got a book on tape, and And that is a meditation on, it's just, a reason I recommend it because it's very simple and he talks you through it. It's a meditation on anger and how to let go of anger. So it's valuable for that. But I'm just saying eventually the other stuff comes so that when you have a meditation where you say, I want to talk to my Aunt Betty. And I'm going to now put myself in a place where Aunt Betty is. I'm going to picture Aunt Betty and I'm going to say, Aunt Betty, I have a question for you. And then ask the question. Take a photograph. This is my meditation. Take a photograph of your loved one. Meditate on it. Picture them. Hear their voice. Okay? Only you know what the sound of their voice is. Hear their voice. Hear their laughter. Ask them a question. Be open to the answer, wherever it comes from. You do that every night for a couple of weeks. I've heard a couple of people say this. They'll answer you. And it might be a phone call from Pete saying, I don't know why I'm calling you about the word bingo, but you know, bingo seems to be the thing, and you're like, oh my God, that's Aunt Betty's favorite game. That's funny. You see? But have faith in the fact that the reason you're here, and Scott DeTamble has said this in a talk before, I'm quoting him, but you're the courageous ones. You people are all here on the planet because you had the courage to come here. It's hard to see it. Not everybody has to come. You have free will. You can say, I don't want to do that lifetime. That's too much. You had the courage to come here. So have a little more faith in yourself. Every time I've done one of these sessions, when they get to their counsel and they ask, how am I doing? The counsel says the same thing. You're doing great. You're doing exactly what you signed up for, and you're doing a heck of a job of it. So give yourself a pat on the back. You had courage to come here and do this. So I congratulate you for your courage. Go ahead.
I've always felt we're all one. We're all connected very strongly, and I'm studying the Native American.
Turn the microphone
The
toward the
Lakota religion.
Oh, is that right? Great.
And I name my cockatoo Meetalk, which means we're all connected, because I love that thought so much.
Lovely.
And I've always felt very close to animals, and I feel
Uh-huh.
the smallest little animal. And I have friends that go shooting, they kill animals to eat. But I couldn't do that. I couldn't look at something in the eye and kill it. No, I'm only doing meat, so
How do you reconcile that? Exactly. Well, that's a great question,
I
and
had a spider in the shower the other day and killed it accidentally, and I felt so bad for it.
well, you were probably a Tibetan monk in a previous lifetime. Or a Jain monk. They go around and they push away all the insects so they don't step on them. Listen, I know what you're saying, and a couple of things just come to mind. One is the animals and pets that you've loved and had in your lifetime, they have their own realms. Animals of the earth, animals of the sky, and animals of the water all have their own realms. They don't mix, they don't intermingle. We, unfortunately, don't get to be animals, according to all this research. I think you can project yourself into an animal. I think that's a possibility, so you can experience it and see it and maybe even remember that, but by and large, we don't reincarnate as them. However, what you find is that all these realms that we live amongst, animals, for example, trees have their own realm, according to what these people say. We don't see them as connected to us. We see them as separate entities, and you're not seeing that. You're looking at an animal and you're understanding and seeing that they're connected to you. How a person could take a rifle and shoot an animal, even one attacking you. Okay, there is a construct there. I've had friends who've been trampled by animals and stuff. There is that construct of like, well, I'm on the planet and I want to survive, and I don't want to, be that, so it happens. However, you could see it from the angle of those people are on their path. Those people who are out hunting are on their path. They have stuff to learn. When you take judgment off the table, when you open your heart to everyone, even the hunter, you take judgment off. I can't judge you because I can't be in your shoes. I don't know why you're doing that. I find it ridiculous, but I can't judge you for it. I can only say that if I were in your shoes, or if I was part of your soul group, I'd spank you. But I'm not. So I'm going to reserve my judgment to understand that you're trying to learn something or work something out. There was a story, I mentioned it at Flipside, of a Marine who had been photographed smoking a cigarette during the Iraq War, and they called him the Marlboro Man. And the writer was haunted by the image of the photograph, and he tracked this guy down. And of course, he was really struggling and lost his family, his wife, and PTSD, and he just couldn't get through life. And I saw in the article that he said, every time I pulled the trigger, he was a sniper, very successful sniper, and every time I pulled the trigger, I saw the lifetime of the person I was killing flash before my eyes. Now, that would screw you up, you know? But here's the thing, sometimes we go and sit in a movie theater and we watch something happen and we go, I could never do that. I don't want to do that. You actually learn the lesson because you watch other people do it. Like we're watching our loved ones do stuff bad and go, oh man, look what you're doing, cut that out. That same experience we can learn from watching and observing and opening our hearts to other people. So that's all that's what I really say is, like, you know, even the Dalai Lama, his doctor came to him and said, and I've met His Holiness a bunch of times, he's a really wonderful guy. You know, he's a guy, he's a person, he's a human, whatever. But as he said, his doctor said, you know, vegetarianism doesn't work for you. You need more of this kind of protein to make you healthy. And until somebody synthesizes that, or, you know, makes another version of it, there is a certain thing of, you know, there's an animal self, and then there's a spiritual self. So, you know, if you were in the Donner Party, and you had to sacrifice yourself so your friends could live, there's no other higher courageous thing, I think. You know, we sense that. Giving your life so others could live. That's a really powerful image, especially when you think of the many lifetimes we have. This is just one. It's a big deal. You want to eat me? Go ahead. I'll eat you the next lifetime. Don't worry about it, man. Come on. Let's not stress over this. We got to, as I'm fond of saying, the good news is we don't die. The bad news is we don't die. So we got a mountain of other lifetimes to learn and do and and get back to work. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I have one more question here.
Okay.
This is the last question, sorry.
Aw, sorry. By the way, I'm online, richmartini@yahoo.com. Any question, I'm happy to answer.
The incarnations, does each one improve? Does our lives get better, or do you know that each time you come back is a better life?
Yeah, you know what? It's a perspective of theater. So think of it as a playing an acting part, an acting role. I've interviewed people who saw a lifetime which they loathed. You know, a previous lifetime. This one woman in Flipside, she says, I was so boring. What a boring life. I was so afraid of life. I couldn't get further. And I died an old maid, and I eventually got murdered in the street, and it was so boring. What a waste. So she was seeing it from this perspective. But in the soul perspective, when she got into the life between lives, her spiritual other, her mate, we all seem to have one, and we may not be with them in this lifetime, and we may have agreed not to. Like, why don't you go learn something? You know, I'm going to go learn something. We'll get back together. Don't worry about it. It's no big deal. When she saw the spiritual other who said, you know, I was your boyfriend who went off to war and died, and you just decided to have a rest life, a life where you just didn't do anything. Nothing happened. But I've also heard this. Earth is the ballpark. There are other places to incarnate, I'm sorry to say. There's other realms, there's other planets, I'm sorry to say. Because, you know, who wants to go to another planet? This isn't the only ballpark. But a lot of people say it's the best ballpark. As one person said, you can learn more in one day of tragedy, spiritually, than you can from 5,000 years on some boring planet. So the answer is, yeah, we may not learn something, we may come here and not progress, but in these accounts of between lives, you see young souls, as Michael Newton discovered in Destiny of Souls, the second book. He started asking people, if I could see the color you are, what color would you be? He realized that, oh, each person as they progress gets to a different color. It's not a hierarchy, better, worse. It's younger, older. So when we see in these accounts between lives where people say, well, he's a younger soul, and this person's a little bit older, and this elder is a little bit wiser, and they're a little bit older. There's no hierarchy. Not one better than the other. Everyone's equal. No one gets to hoard the jelly beans, as somebody put it. But all those different lifetimes, all those different energies, all add up to what the universe is. So, your soul group is right with you all the time. And when you get back there and they go, you might even go back and say, I didn't do anything. I wasted so much time. Or even in the case of a suicide, I've had people tell me that the previous lifetime they had committed suicide, and they got back there, and it was like their soul group was saying, dude, all that work for us to work together, and you just blew it. You just screwed up the whole play. If you had waited till Wednesday, the tickets to Rome were supposed to show up, and you were going to, remember, that was the third act. And the person feels the pain of what they've done. Oh, I screwed it up for everybody. Oh, God, I thought I could handle that lifetime. I just couldn't. I'm sorry. Everybody's like, well, all right, look. We got a bunch more we're going to do. Let's not stress over it now. You're okay. We love you. We love you. It's okay. Don't worry about it. And after that talk, a woman came up to me and said, I was a Wednesday person. I said, what do you mean? She said, I decided to commit suicide. I went online, learned how to do it, and I went to the hardware store, and I was in line at the hardware store with the chemicals to kill myself. And I overheard these two boys talking, and there were two African boys from Uganda who had been part of that lost generation. Parents had died in Sudan, and they had found their way to Uganda. And as she talked to them, she sensed it and felt it like, this is why I'm on the planet. And she has moved to Uganda and takes care of these boys and other orphans. She waited. So, we have free will to make mistakes. That's the wonderful part of it. We have free will and we make mistakes. Maybe not so good, but no judgment there. So when you look at it from that angle of like there's no real judgment about good or bad lifetimes, it's just learning. I'll tell you, in one of my sessions, and by the way, I've done 3 now, because I keep doing other ones to see if maybe I could pick up some more information. In one of my sessions, Scott DeTamble had my spirit guide go through the process. How does it work? And he said, well, think of it this way. When Rich's soul was created, and it's not the Big Bang, it's because they're outside of time. It's just whenever souls are created, they're created. That's why there can be 6 billion people on the planet. Souls can come into existence at any time. But when Rich was created, he was taken care of by, Newton called them midwives, but like sort of caretaker souls. And then at some point, my guide had gone through all of his lifetimes, and his, as he put it, his graduation gift was me. So he was learning to be a guide, and when he graduated from all of his lifetimes, Richard became his graduation gift. And he said, and Richard and I sat down and examined how are we going to, he said, think of it as a blank canvas, and each lifetime is paint. How are we going to get this incredible 3-dimensional portrait of a soul, of a person, of a journey? And who knows? By the time Richard's done with all of his lifetimes, someone else will be his gift. And I was thinking to myself, really? Can you imagine having to watch over some annoying lifetime person that you can't quite get them to get it straight? And you've got to be their teacher for like millennia. But again, once you're outside of time, it might be really different. Anyway, my point is, it's just paint on the canvas. It's just more paint on the canvas. So good, bad, I think in your heart you kind of know, like, am I doing the right thing? Am I helping people? Am I compassionate? And if you can do that, it makes you feel better, it makes other people feel better. And your soul group really appreciates every laugh that they can get out of you. All right, very good. Thank you very much.